and this big heavy microphone, which I'm hoping is providing some good audio, then we can get started. Thinking about the idea of voice, even a lot of writers really have an idea of voice as this kind of abstract thing, but it's really not super hard. You can just think of it the same way as you think of your own voice. When you say something like, "My sister is never sarcastic," do you want to say it in a sarcastic tone of voice, or do you mean it in a genuine tone of voice? Or if you say, "I'll be okay if we don't go to Yogurtland," do you mean to say it like, "I'll be okay if you don't go to Yogurtland," implying that, yeah, you actually really do want to go to Yogurtland? Or do you mean it in a very upbeat way, like, "I'll be okay if you don't go to Yogurtland," implying that you genuinely mean, yeah, I'll be just perfectly happy if we don't go and get frozen yogurt. So every day you change your voice and the way you speak to get your message across, and you can do the exact same thing in writing. In fact, it's extremely important to do so, because otherwise your readers may not know what kind of tone you're trying to convey, and they may not get a very good sense of your characters. So voice and character development are really linked together very much. When you think about this question, how do you think a snobby princess might sound different from an innocent child or a sinister dwarf? You have a really good idea of the way voice plays into character development. So I want to hear from you. What kind of words do you think a snobby princess might use when she's describing people? Any ideas? Irritating. Yeah, definitely. It would probably be lots of irritating. Maybe the way she says would even be irritating. So she might say, "Oh, these people, my minions, they're so irritating, day in, day out." What are some other words? Because of course, no matter how snobby or annoying this princess is, she can't just say the same word over and over and over again. Rude. Great. So she might be rude, she might describe others as rude, annoying. Great. What are some other words that really indicate how much she thinks of herself versus others? Mean, snooty. Great. Vicious. Okay, great. So maybe sort of a mean streak. These are a lot of really good words. And when you're thinking about character, so for instance, the snobby princess, you want to think of words like this: brainstorm. And another thing is that you want to try to get beyond sort of the stock character. So for instance, the snobby princess, you've probably seen similar characters, maybe not princesses, but you know, high school girls, or there are these characters of mean girls a lot in different kinds of stories, so you might want to try to give her a good side in order to make her a more round, dynamic character, someone who changes over the course of the story, which is super important to making sure that your story is interesting. Because here's what happens. If you open up a book and all the characters are characters you feel like you've met before, you feel like you've read about before. There's the jock and the cheerleader and the evil plumber. Okay, that one's maybe new. Maybe a few books. So if you open up a book and there are all these stock characters, that is, characters that have been used a lot before, then you may think, this story isn't very original. So in order to give your story some originality, you have to really think about, how do I make these characters like real people with good sides and bad sides? So maybe this snobby princess has a bit of a backstory as to why she is that way. Maybe this innocent child has a destructive addiction to chocolate. Maybe the sinister dwarf is just grumpy and actually works extremely hard to provide for his family. Something like that. So there are all these possibilities. But when we think about voice, we want to use voice to convey their character, their good sides and their bad sides. And you also don't want to use the same voice to describe all of these people. The snobby princess you'll necessarily want to describe in a different way than the child or the dwarf. And when you're speaking from their point of view, when you're saying, "I'm the snobby princess," not that you'd actually say that, but when you're saying "I" and "we," using the first person, then your voice will also change to match the way they might speak in real life. So that's how we can think about character development and voice. And one of the best things as well about voice is that you can really add your own voice to your stories and your personal narratives. Because when you write in a personal voice, you really let your personality shine through. If you think about how might I show my personality through voice, it doesn't necessarily have to be through, say, using a lot of exclamation marks. If you're a happy person, you can get voice across using word choice, using what you like and dislike, really expressing your feelings. You could tell someone your fears and daydreams, and really doing this all in writing, just as you do in real life, allows you to create very compelling stories. So here's tip number 1. When you're writing a personal narrative or an essay or article that is explaining your opinion, really let your personality shine through. When you're writing a story narrated by a character, use voice to develop their character traits. Write in a personal voice and let the reader know what you thought and felt or think and feel. So let's give this a try. Let's think of a character. So it doesn't have to be a snobby princess. It could be a sinister dwarf or maybe a insecure golf player. I'm not sure where I'm coming up with these. Wow. So just think of a character. It could be a character that you've written about before or a completely new one. And we're going to practice writing in their voice to show their character. So does anyone have an idea for a character? Conceited prince, right? Okay, so let's write from the point of view of this conceited prince. Now, incidentally, if any of you have flying fingers or you read my book, then I have a story called The Spoiled Prince, which is about exactly that, okay? Angry dwarf, great. So by the way, it doesn't have to be royalty or dwarves or children. Talking dog named Bob, I like this. Let's get one more idea. Or 2. Corrupted troll, wow. This is awesome, okay? And one, evil hamster. Perfect. I'm seeing a bit of a theme developing here. Lots of anthropomorphism going on. That's a big word that basically means talking animals or animals with human characteristics. All right, so I'm going to open up a Word document and start writing some ideas. Oh, vicious vampire. We have one more. Great. So give me a second to move over there. Okay, so let's practice, let's do the perspective of the evil hamster right now. Okay, so this evil hamster, how would we really show its voice, show its character through what it's saying? So remember that we can use what someone likes and dislikes and how they speak about others, things like that to really show their voice. So, this evil hamster, let me try to zoom in a little bit. Okay, we need some think time, that's fine. So maybe one easy way to get started is I'm going to make a list of dislikes of this evil hamster. So if you have any ideas as to what this evil hamster really dislikes, that can be incredibly helpful. So, maybe I'll get started, I'll add a couple. So maybe this evil hamster really dislikes wheels, or at least the type that you run on, because of childhood trauma. Oh, perfect. Didn't have carrots, evil vitamins, children picked on him roughly, an evil wizard put a spell on him. Wow, that is definitely some life story. So, So this evil hamster dislikes wheels, carrots, vitamins, children, wizards, magic. Is that pretty accurate? Okay, yeah, the mic is right here, so I'm hoping that I'm going to move it a little closer. Alright, so this definitely, if we can really convey this through our writing, this could actually help show a lot about his character, especially if we explain why. Now, when we're writing, we want to make sure that we don't start doing something like this. The evil hamster is evil. It is evil because of childhood trauma. It was never given the right vitamins and carrots. Children picked it up roughly. Because the problem with this is that what we're doing is we're just kind of telling the life story, but it's not in a particularly interesting way. So what we want to do instead is try to show. Admittedly, it can be a little bit hard to show this, but what are some ways that we could convey this without just telling its life story in this kind of boring way? How could we do this in an interesting way? So, if we're having a hard time thinking, okay, great. So explain how he looks or talks. Perfect. So maybe he says, or he thinks, mwahaha, a lot. Actions, trips other hamsters. Thoughts. What a stupid child. Perfect. So this is how we can really go in and show, not tell. And that way we manage to convey a lot about our character without having to actually write down like a biography. Alright, so let's practice by writing an interaction between this evil hamster and someone. So maybe it's between the evil hamster and the owners, who are a nice family or something. Okay, he bites people when they stick their fingers near him. Sweetie pie, wouldn't you like some more fresh greens? They're so nice and green, said Mrs. Thomas in a saccharine sweet voice to, let's see, what is this hamster's name? Placeholder. LeFaux, I like this. Wow, that's creative. And I see where that comes from too, I think, right? You're trying to say LeFaux, sort of. Perfect. All right, so going to silly woman, LeFaux thought. Okay, let's make him to Lord LeFaux Chuckster. That way we can kind of please everyone. LeFou thought bitterly. What do you know about greens? Real greens come from, let's see, the only real greens in this place are out of my reach. You only give me the carrot tops like they did when I was young. Why must I spend my captivity in this place? His thoughts were interrupted by little Tommy Thomas. I mean, that is like the worst name for a child ever. But okay, let's say, his thoughts were interrupted by little Tommy Thomas waving a chubby finger through the, let's see, gap in the cage. Hamster! Hamster! Tommy squealed happily. And what do you think is the noise the hamster makes when it chomps down on someone's finger? Really viciously. Chomp. Great. Look though. Ah! Went Tommy. Boo boo on my finger. Ouch. Ouch. LeFou smiled inwardly, if such a thing is possible for a hamster, and started nibbling at Tommy's hand. Oops. The stupid boy hadn't even run away. Okay, so hopefully we conveyed this picture of a very nefarious, kind of vicious, very, yes, I'm trying to enlarge it, very vicious, very just overall nasty character of a hamster. So let's read this. Sweetie pie, wouldn't you like some more fresh greens? They're so nice and green, said Mrs. Thomas in a saccharine sweet voice to Lord LeFou Chuckster. Silly woman, LeFou thought bitterly. What do you know about greens? The only real greens in this place are out of my reach. You only give me the carrot tops like they did when I was young. Why must I spend my captivity in this place? His thoughts were interrupted by little Tommy Thomas, waving a chubby finger through the gap in the cage. Hamster! Hamster! Tommy squealed happily. Chomp! Went LeFou. Ah! Went Tommy. Boo-boo on my finger! Ouch! Ouch! LeFou smiled inwardly, if such a thing is possible for a hamster, and started nibbling at Tommy's hand. The stupid boy hadn't even run away. So, there we go. That's an explanation kind of this evil hamster. And you see how we're not incorporating all of his dislikes, but we're doing a pretty good job of showing, one, the dislike of children, and dislike of people who speak to him in general, it seems like. And it also explains kind of the thoughts going on through his head, and how really resentful he is, how bitter he is. This part here, his little insight on his childhood, you only give me the carrot tops like they did when I was young. And he definitely is not happy to be spending his time in this place. Now this is really what we can do with voice. Because imagine for a second that we had a very different kind of hamster. Let's say we had a non-evil hamster, so we had a happy hamster. And maybe its reaction, say when Mrs. Thomas offers greens, would be something like this. Yum! I love greens. My home is so beautiful, and I feel so lucky to be here. There is an adorable little toddler who plays who plays with me all the time. So actually this one's getting a little bit autobiographical here, where it's telling a bit more than showing, but you see how the reaction of these two hamsters would be extremely different, and you can do that with voice. You can do that with word choice. Okay, so students, if you want to start brainstorming for your characters, and I would really like to hear what you've been doing for your characters. So if you could open up a new sheet of notebook paper and write your character name at the top, and then start adding maybe 1 or 2 likes, 1 or 2 dislikes, and think about what words this person would use when they're talking about someone they like, when they're talking about someone they dislike. So for instance, for this evil hamster, we made a list of this evil hamster's dislikes. We also explained how he looks or talks, actions, and thoughts. Another thing that we might do is strengths and weaknesses, because remember, if we want to create well-rounded characters, then they need to have both things that you can admire and things that are very not admirable. So some strengths, maybe he's very tireless and can run on a wheel for a long time, which he really hates, but perhaps is actually good at that. And intelligent, nimble. Let's say those are some traits. So nimble means you can move around very easily. And then weaknesses could be, well, we've already seen a few. Extremely resentful. Let's see. Paranoid, maybe, because perhaps he thinks people are trying to do him harm. Vicious, mean. So there we go. There are some strengths and weaknesses. Now naturally your villains will probably have more weaknesses than your main characters, your good guys will. But it's important even with your good guys, with your protagonists or your main characters, to give them weaknesses in order to make them realistic. Alright, so does anyone, once anyone has anything to share, I'd love to see it, and I'll give you some time to write. Sure, no problem. Just let me know when I should resume. Okay, great, perfect, thanks. So life, guinea pigs, chicken, brushing teeth, jumping, sleeping. So I'm assuming this is a human that we're talking about. Great, so I'm starting to definitely get a picture. Likes these animals, is good with hygiene. That's perfect. I'll mute. I'm sorry, that got really distorted. I wasn't able to pick out too much. Okay, so I guess there's still the audio issue. I do see what you entered in the chat. Okay, so lots of lice, french fries, coffee. I didn't hear quite what you were saying at the end. Could you enter that in the chat maybe? Okay, let me lift up the microphone and see if that does it. Sorry. Are you able to hear me now? And let me try adjusting volume too, to make this a little louder on my end. Hopefully that'll do it. Alright, great. So when we have all these likes and dislikes, and we can really think about how we can convey them in an interesting way, as we did with the hamster, and you see how that tells us a lot about the character. But there's also more that we can do, because beyond using certain words and expressing their likes, dislikes, their opinions, we can also use really good word choice to help develop a well-rounded character. So let me give you an example actually from my book Flying Fingers. I wrote this story called The Spoiled Prince, and yes, I will go through that. And so in The Spoiled Prince, actually, right at the beginning, I'm trying to show the character basically by an interaction between the spoiled prince, the main character, and one of his servants in the royal palace. So let me just find this here. Here we go. So The Spoiled Prince, to tell the truth, I actually based on someone that I know, and he was actually not mad at me about this. He thought it was cool that he was in a book, which was a pretty typical reaction. Anyhow, here's The Spoiled Prince. I'll just read like the first passage. In the brightness of his lavish antechamber, Prince Garrick scornfully tossed aside a beautiful gold-embossed leather-bound book. Peasant's trash, he scoffed to the trembling minion who presented the gift. Beg pardon, your superior highness, I never meant no harm, the servant stuttered, stepping back and tripping over an ornately designed china pitcher. As if you expect me, the intelligent and the clever, to believe that, Garrick said disdainfully, staring at the servant with contempt. I shall bring another book at your behest, your highness, the man said, kneeling at Garrick's feet. Paw! Garrick exclaimed, kicking the book absent-mindedly. I have no mind for boring, unexciting epics. So, right in these beginning sentences, my goal in writing the short story was really to show what a spoiled character he is. He's really nasty, he doesn't appreciate what he has, he just tosses aside this beautiful book, he yells at the servant who brought it to him, and this servant is being very respectful and being extremely, just really bowing down before him, and Garrick is really treating him with all this contempt and all this meanness. But the great thing is that I didn't have to say right at the beginning, Garrick is mean, Garrick doesn't treat servants very well, Garrick doesn't appreciate what he has. I'm just showing it through his dialogue with the character, through his interaction. So we can do this using dialogue really effectively. If we go back and look at our evil hamster example, which didn't take us long to write at all, so I'm going to move to that one. With the evil hamster example, we made this list, but then we thought about how can we show this? Explaining how he looks or talks, so using dialogue, the actions that he takes, like tripping other hamsters, biting a child's finger, this adorable little child who has this chubby finger, thoughts, strengths, and weaknesses we can also show in our dialogue. So we see how he thinks very nastily about people, even those that are nice to him. So you can imagine that he would think really even worse about people who are actually mean to him. So through this very short passage, we're able to convey a lot about the hamster's character. So I'm hoping that helps as far as showing, not telling. And I think it's really right to practice. If you make a list of some things, then ask yourself, okay, how would I show this with dialogue, with the things that are being said? And then how would I show this with adjectives and word choice, which is sort of our next topic. Okay, so I'm going to actually skip over a couple slides since we've gone over this before. Alright, tip number 2 is use word choice to create powerful voice and give the reader an idea of what type of person you are. So in our writer's toolbox of sorts, we have the option to use dialogue to show, and we can also use the words that we use. Putting thought into your writing voice allows you to shape how people see you and others. For example, take a look at this. Pompeia was a scrawny girl with a beaky nose and an imperious attitude. So if you think about that sentence, do you think that the person writing about Pompeia, scrawny, beaky, imperious, do you think that they dislike her or they like her? Is it positive or negative? Dislike, definitely. When you use words like scrawny to describe someone and beaky, imperious, attitude, this all conveys this kind of not very pleasant image. Especially if you say scrawny, that indicates that someone's kind of like thin, sort of weak. It's not a very nice word to use. Now if you say instead, Pompeia was a slender girl with an aquiline nose and a confident demeanor, you have almost a completely different image of a person. Yet you're talking about the same person and essentially saying the same things. It's all in those words that you change that makes the difference. So instead of scrawny, you say slender, which has positive connotations. A connotation is sort of the things that a word evokes and things that people think of when you say a word. So for instance, if you say sprawling versus large, or sprawling versus spacious, spacious is positive, sprawling would indicate kind of like where big has gone too far. You can think of lots of words like that, scrawny versus slender, small versus wiry. Okay, some of them can kind of go either way, but when you think about the connotations of a word, you can really use it to your advantage. So the first creates a negative image, and the second creates a positive image. We can really use this effectively for character development. If we think about words that have positive connotations, we can use them to describe our main characters, even if our main characters, maybe we don't imagine them to be so great looking, but perhaps if we have a character who really likes our main character, they would describe them in that way. So that kind of ties into voice. The words that we choose have a huge impact on the way that our voice sounds. Just as you can choose talk in a sarcastic way, or a critical way, or an excited way, you can have your characters talk in these ways to write in different tones. Here's another example of how you might do positive versus negative. Oops. Last week, my family piled into our station wagon and took a leisurely drive to Lake Pontchartrain. Negative. Last week, we were crammed into the family station wagon for an endless drive to Lake Pontchartrain. So again, only changing a few words, piled into versus crammed into, and leisurely versus endless. But one evokes all this, oh, it's so beautiful outside, we're taking this nice slow drive, versus, oh, when will we get there, why has this drive not ended yet? So you can completely do this just by changing a few words, which makes you as a writer extremely powerful. When we think back to that negative hamster, you can make anything look bad. So for instance, that woman who, Mrs. Thomas, who the evil hamster was thinking about, I'm going to go back and find that, sorry, this may be a little bit weird to see the slides change so fast. So evil hamster, Mrs. Thomas said that in a saccharine sweet voice. So when you say something like saccharine sweet, that indicates that the sweetness is a little bit over the top, because saccharin is extremely sweet. So it's like an artificial sugar. So if you think about saccharine sweet, then that conveys artificiality, it conveys over sweetness, something that's too sweet. So by using that simple word, that simple adjective to describe Mrs. Thomas, we're giving an insight into what LaFaux Chuckster thinks about, how he thinks about her. So that's how we can use word choice to convey character, as well as dialogue, as well as their actions in the story. So now, does anyone have some ideas for your characters that you can share? What are some words that you might use to really describe them well? Courageous, bravery, perfect. So if we think about a word like courageous and bravery, these are perfect words to describe a main character or even a villain, but the great thing is that you can change it depending on your needs. If you want to show that someone is courageous in a really awesome way, you'll say that they courageously threw themselves forward off the cliff to save the population of mice below. I don't know even where that came from. I think that was like one of the Gregor the Underlander books that someone does that. Anyhow, if you were saying how stupid they are by, I don't know, running off the cliff or by climbing up the mountain, then you could say they stupidly or brashly threw themselves forward, ran up the side of the mountain, whatever. So you can definitely use words to convey either how awesome they are or how stupid they are by doing something before really thinking about it, which is kind of maybe a possible negative to doing something really bravely. Generous. Great. So generous, there's really not much of a negative to that. Generous would be a good word to describe a character in a book. And you might also want to do something where you're kind of describing them indirectly. You could describe them by showing what other people say about them. So practicing word choice in your notebooks, great. I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. And in a few minutes, I'll probably do questions as well. Oh, perfect. Great. So we have clumsy and uncoordinated, careless, wow, impulsive, preoccupied. Perfect. Oh, and these are really good because you don't necessarily even have to use every single word. You can show a lot of these. For instance, if the character being careless was a really big part of your story, you could not only say that they were careless, but you could also show them leaving an important document around, or maybe when they walk to school, dropping all their homework as they walk out of their backpack, kind of like Hansel and Gretel dropping crumbs, only it's important stuff that has to be turned in. Preoccupied, you could show them really kind of not hearing things, saying, what was that? And not catching things because of how busy they are. And then I kind of made a list of words of my own. It doesn't quite measure up to some of your words. You have some really nice ones. I like preoccupied, uncoordinated. These are very easy to show. Impulsive, you can definitely show as well by having someone just kind of jump right into the action. If you have something like contemptuous or scornful, some words that I used a lot in The Spoiled Prince, you can show these by dialogue, how someone speaks. So again, making this list of words, you can not only use them directly in the story to describe your characters or to describe others, you can also show them really well with dialogue and with action. So, if we were to write about a clumsy unicorn, then we could really create this character easily by showing them bumping their horn into everything and everyone and saying sorry as they walk past through the public square because they keep on knocking things over and maybe overturning a giant stall of oranges, and everyone gets angry at the poor clumsy unicorn. So there could be that part. Maybe the clumsy unicorn is also sinister, has a kind of dark, ominous side. The sort of feeling that you get when you hear scary music would be sinister. And so maybe this clumsy unicorn does have this strange motive behind all of it's doing. So yeah, you can use this word choice to create a very powerful voice and to really create character, as well as give the reader an idea of what type of person you are if you're writing from your point of view, say in a narrative or in a personal essay, something like that. So, I think that we've gotten some great ideas. I'm hoping that you have a lot of great material for your writing as you move on through your stories in your writer's notebooks. Think very carefully about voice. When to use it is also an important thing, because what happens is sometimes you'll think, okay, it's awesome to use lots of voice everywhere. When you're writing a formal research paper, it's not so great to say, I love everything about this project is awesome. Much as your teachers may appreciate that, it generally doesn't belong in, say, something very formal where a more objective point of view is required. So objectivity is where you don't really have any of your personal opinions involved. So evaluate your writing carefully and make sure that you're using voice when it's called for. So in fiction, in personal narrative, in personal essays, it works great. Alright, so I'd be happy to take any questions, and I think I can have maybe 2 or 3. How in my mystery do I show that the character changes? Great question. This is something that brings up a very essential point actually, which is that the main character definitely, really all the characters should change somewhat, large or small, over the course of the story. If nobody changed, then it would be kind of like, well, what's the point of the story? So how in your story do you show that the character changes? One way would be to show, think about what they're like before and what they're like after. You can kind of make a list, maybe even in your writing notebook, guys, of what do you think are some of the characteristics of the character that really notably change? So for instance, for the Spoiled Prince, he's very contemptuous of others, he's extremely scornful, so that means he really has disregard for other people, he thinks he's so much better than them. At the end of the book, he's a lot more cooperative. He works well with his friends, he works well with other people, and he's a lot more obedient and willing to do what other people tell him to do, actually, instead of just being like, oh, I'm so much better than you. So you can make a list of kind of 2 major things that change. So for the spoiled prince, I'll quickly write it down and just give you an idea. I would kind of draw an arrow. So scornful to cooperative, and in your case it might be sort of weak-willed to brave, or it could be generous to, this would be a bad one, but generous to selfish. You could actually have them change in a negative way. That would be slightly depressing, but yeah, that's totally realistic. Human beings do that all the time. So you can just draw an arrow between, say, one of the words that describes your character at the beginning and one of the words that describes them at the end, and then show how they've changed at the end in the same way as you showed their characteristics in the beginning. Any other questions? How do you put voice into realistic fiction? Great question. Well, you can do it in much the same way that you do with, say, fantasy or mystery. You might not go quite as over the top, say, if in realistic fiction you don't really have so many sinister dwarves. That's absolutely okay. You can still show the voice by how someone speaks. So for instance, if I were writing a piece of realistic fiction from the point of view of someone very much like myself, so I would be saying I, we, really narrating it from the first person point of view, then I would use a voice. Think of the way that you talk in everyday life, the way that you talk in real life, and really mirror that in your story. So for instance, when you're angry at your parents, do you say, "Dear mother and father, currently I am not in a happy state of mood because of your actions against me. Because of this, I plan to retire to my room for the time being and will most likely not see you before tomorrow at school." Who talks to their parents like that? Nobody. So in realistic fiction, just think about the way that you talk to your parents. It'd be, "Mom, Dad, I am so angry, I'm going to my room right now, bye." And you can mirror that in your realistic fiction to really create that sense of, okay, this is stuff that actually feels like it's happening. When I wrote a short story, Diary of a Preteen, I really tried to do this, to get inside the head of a preteen and to really express those feelings that she's going through. So that would be my thinking, is that you really want to mirror the way that you talk or mirror the way that other people in your lives talk in order to have that realistic aspect, but it can also show the way that they feel and the type of person that they are just as effectively as you can do in fantasy or other genres. Alright, and I hope that that's been helpful, and I will definitely be answering any other questions on Edmodo, so keep posting. I'll definitely be reading all the comments. I may not answer every single question, but I'll try to answer as many as I can, and I'll be posting resources, presentations, and things like that. I can also post what we wrote about the evil hamster there for your future reference, so hopefully that's helpful. And I hope that everyone had a great day talking about voice, and just really think about, as you're walking down the street, as you're observing the world, listening to your teachers, listening to your friends, think, how are they saying that? What does their voice mean? And keep a mental note of that for reference in your stories, because the real world is really the best teacher about voice. So yeah, be a great listener, be a great writer. Thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great day.